The storm had rolled in with little warning. Gray clouds gathered above the small coastal town of Brightport as Jamie Winters finished his shift at the local supermarket. 6 years he had worked there, scanning items, making small talk with the regulars, and watching life pass by through the automatic doors. At 32, he had settled into the comfortable rhythm of predictability that defined his existence. "Looks nasty out there," remarked Mrs. Pemberton as Jamie handed her the receipt. She was one of his favorite customers, a retired teacher who always had a kind word and genuine interest in his day. "You should wait it out, dear." Jamie smiled genuinely. "Thanks, Mrs. P, but I need to get home. My sister is visiting tonight." "How lovely. Sarah always was such a bright girl. Give her my regards." Mrs. Pemberton gathered her shopping bags. "And Jamie? That book recommendation you gave me last week was wonderful. You have excellent taste in mysteries." As he stepped outside, the air crackled with electricity. The car park was nearly empty, most people having sought shelter from the approaching storm. Jamie pulled his jacket tighter and quickened his pace toward the bus stop at the edge of the shopping center. The first fat raindrops began to fall as he reached the halfway point across the exposed concrete expanse. Within seconds, the heavens opened completely. Thunder rumbled overhead, growing increasingly louder. Jamie broke into a jog, his uniform shoes slipping slightly on the wet surface. The bus shelter was just ahead, perhaps 50 meters away, when the world around him suddenly illuminated with blinding white light. He never heard the thunderclap that followed. There was only the searing flash, a sensation of floating, and then darkness. "Can you hear me?" The voice seemed to come from somewhere far away. "Sir, can you hear me?" Jamie blinked. A paramedic was leaning over him, her face a mask of professional concern. Behind her, the sky had cleared to reveal early evening stars. "What happened?" Jamie asked, surprised by how clear his voice sounded. "You were struck by lightning," the paramedic explained. "Someone called an ambulance. You were unconscious for about 4 minutes." Jamie sat up slowly, expecting pain, but finding none. In fact, he felt oddly alert, as though he had just awakened from the most refreshing sleep of his life. "We need to take you to hospital for observation," the paramedic continued. "Lightning strikes can cause internal injuries that aren't immediately apparent." As they helped him onto the stretcher, Jamie noticed something strange. The paramedic's badge read, "Westshire Ambulance Service NHS Trust," and beneath it was a series of numbers that Jamie assumed was an identification code. Without thinking, he mentally calculated the prime factors of the 6-digit number and found himself wondering about the probability distribution of employee ID numbers within the trust. This was not how his mind usually worked. At the hospital, the doctor who examined him was puzzled. "Your ECG is normal. Blood work shows no sign of cellular damage." Quite remarkable, really. Lightning strikes often cause cardiac arrhythmias, burns, or neurological damage. Jamie nodded, but his attention was elsewhere. He found himself studying the medical chart hanging from the foot of his bed, absorbing and understanding the abbreviations and values that would have been meaningless to him hours earlier. "I feel fine," Jamie said. "Better than fine, actually." The doctor smiled indulgently. "Nevertheless, we would like to keep you overnight for observation. Standard protocol for lightning strike victims." That night, unable to sleep, Jamie reached for the dog-eared paperback he kept in his jacket pocket. It was a detective novel he had been slowly working through for weeks. He finished the remaining 200 pages in just over an hour, not only following the plot with perfect clarity, but also identifying several logical inconsistencies in the mystery that he had previously missed. When the nurse brought breakfast the next morning, Jamie asked if she had a newspaper. "Just the crossword," she said apologetically, handing him the puzzle page torn from a newspaper. Someone took the rest. Jamie had never been particularly good at crosswords. His sister Sarah was the puzzle person in the family. But as he glanced at the clues, answers began filling his mind immediately. He completed the entire puzzle, including the cryptic clues, in under 6 minutes. Something had changed inside his brain. The lightning had rewired his neural pathways, creating new connections and possibilities that had never existed before. After being discharged with a clean bill of health, Jamie returned to his small flat and immediately went online. He spent the next 72 hours consuming information at a staggering rate. Mathematics, physics, literature, history, economics, computer science, languages. His mind processed and retained everything with perfect clarity. On Monday morning, he called in sick to the supermarket. By Wednesday, he had tendered his resignation. "But why?" asked his manager, genuinely confused. "You have been here for years, Jamie. Is it about the assistant supervisor position? Because I was considering you for that. Jamie smiled politely. Thank you, but I need to make some changes. It is time. Within a month, Jamie had earned several online certifications in finance and data analysis. He applied for an entry-level position at Brightport Community Bank. During the interview, he dazzled the hiring manager with his understanding of banking regulations and financial models. Your resume shows no formal education in finance, the manager said, reviewing his application. Where did you learn all this? Self-taught, Jamie replied simply. He was hired as a junior analyst. 3 months later, he was promoted to senior analyst after identifying a pattern in loan defaults that allowed the bank to adjust its risk assessment model, saving them considerable money. But it was during his time at the community bank that Jamie first used his abilities for something deeply personal. Mrs. Pemberton visited him at work one afternoon, her usually cheerful demeanor clouded with worry. Jamie, dear, I hope you don't mind me bothering you at work, she said, twisting her handbag strap nervously. It's my grandson, Tommy. He's gotten mixed up with some loan sharks. Borrowed money for university that turned into something much worse. I don't understand the paperwork they're showing him, but they're threatening to take his flat. Jamie examined the documents Mrs. Pemberton had brought. Within minutes, his enhanced mind identified multiple legal violations in the lending practices, predatory clauses that exploited Tommy's desperation and inexperience. He spent the next week researching similar cases, building a comprehensive legal strategy. These contracts are illegal, Jamie explained to Tommy and Mrs. Pemberton in the bank's conference room. I have prepared documentation for the Financial Conduct Authority and connected you with the solicitor who specializes in these cases. You won't owe them a penny beyond the original loan amount. Watching Mrs. Pemberton's tears of relief, seeing Tommy's future restored, Jamie felt something profound. His abilities had allowed him to protect people he cared about, to use his gifts in service of something meaningful rather than merely profitable. By the 18-month mark, Jamie had been recruited by Harrington Financial, a prestigious investment firm in London. His meteoric rise continued as he demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to analyze market trends and predict economic shifts. 4 years after the lightning strike, Jamie Winters sat in his corner office on the 32nd floor of a gleaming glass tower in Canary Wharf. At 36, he was now the youngest partner in the history of the firm, with a 7-figure salary and a reputation as a financial wizard. His flat in Knightsbridge was immaculately decorated according to the principles of optimal spatial aesthetics and chromatic psychology. His wardrobe consisted of bespoke suits, each selected to project appropriate authority while maintaining optimum comfort. His diet was calibrated to provide perfect nutritional balance and cognitive support. Every aspect of his life had been optimized for efficiency and success. The recognition came gradually at first, then with increasing urgency. Jamie began to notice the subtle ways his enhanced intelligence had started to isolate him from the world he once knew. Conversations with colleagues became exercises in translation, his mind racing ahead of their thoughts, predicting their responses, analyzing their motivations while they were still forming their first words. At client dinners, he found himself internally calculating the probability matrices of market fluctuations, while nodding along to discussions about weekend plans and family holidays. The disconnect was becoming impossible to ignore. And yet, on a crisp autumn evening, Jamie stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, looking out over the twinkling lights of London. Below, tiny figures moved along the streets, going about their lives with a purposefulness that suddenly seemed foreign to him. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Missing you at Dad's birthday dinner. He asked about you again. Please call when you can. Jamie placed the phone face down on his desk. He had missed the last 3 family gatherings, always citing work commitments. The truth was more complicated. Conversations with his family had become increasingly difficult. Their concerns and interests seemed trivial, their understanding of the world frustratingly limited. Even Sarah, who had once been his closest confidant, now appeared to move through life at a glacial pace, failing to see patterns and connections that were blindingly obvious to Jamie. Working late again? Jamie turned to see Charlotte from compliance standing in his doorway. She was holding a paper cup of coffee and smiling. The Morrison account needs attention, he replied automatically. The Morrison account always needs attention, Charlotte said with a small laugh. A few of us are going to that new place around the corner. You should join. Apparently they make cocktails with liquid nitrogen. Jamie opened his mouth to decline, but something made him pause. Charlotte was intelligent by conventional standards, though not exceptionally so. Yet she possessed a quality that Jamie had begun to recognize and, lately, to envy: contentment. Actually, he said, surprising himself, that sounds interesting. The bar was crowded and loud, with theatrical bartenders creating clouds of vapor as they mixed drinks. Jamie sat with Charlotte and 3 other colleagues, analyzing their conversation patterns while nursing a scotch he had ordered instead of the novelty cocktails. "Earth to Jamie," said Mark from trading, waving a hand in front of Jamie's face. Charlotte asked what you do for fun. Jamie blinked. "Fun?" They all laughed, assuming he was making a joke about being a workaholic. But the question had genuinely caught him off guard. What did he do for fun? He read extensively, of course, constantly absorbing new information. He solved complex mathematical problems. He learned new languages. But were those activities fun? Or were they simply extensions of his compulsive need to exercise his enhanced cognitive abilities? "I play chess," he finally offered, which was at least partially true. He sometimes played online, though he had stopped finding it challenging some time ago. "Oh, you should join the company tournament," Mark suggested. "We are terrible, but we have a good time. Lots of trash talk and beer." Jamie nodded noncommittally. The conversation moved on, flowing around topics of little intellectual substance, a new Netflix series, office gossip, plans for upcoming holidays. Yet Jamie found himself strangely drawn to the easy laughter and simple camaraderie. As he looked around the table, he realized that these people, with their ordinary intellects and uncomplicated pleasures, appeared genuinely happy. They found joy in experiences that Jamie had long since categorized as trivial. Their limitation in a perverse way seemed to be their salvation. Later that night, unable to sleep despite his precisely optimized bedroom environment, Jamie opened his laptop and began researching happiness. Not as a philosophical concept, which he had already extensively studied, but as a neurochemical phenomenon. The data was clear. Intelligence and happiness were not positively correlated beyond a certain threshold. In fact, some studies suggested a negative correlation at the highest IQ levels. Terms like existential depression and intellectual isolation appeared frequently in the literature. Jamie closed the laptop and walked to the window of his bedroom. The city was never truly dark, with streetlights and buildings creating a perpetual twilight. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass and tried to remember what it had felt like before the lightning. Before his mind had become both his greatest asset and his prison. He had been happy then, hadn't he? Content to work his shift, chat with regulars, watch television in the evening, meet friends at the pub on weekends. Simple pleasures had been enough. Now, nothing was enough. His mind constantly raced ahead, seeking new problems to solve, new information to process. There was no satisfaction, only momentary respite from the endless hunger for stimulation. The next morning, Jamie made a decision. He would apply his enhanced intelligence to the problem of his own happiness. If his mind could master global financial markets, surely it could solve the puzzle of personal contentment. He began with structural changes. He reduced his working hours, despite the partner's objections. He established a strict policy of not bringing work home. He scheduled regular calls with his family and even attended a football match with his father, something they had done often before the lightning. The family dinner was a disaster. Jamie arrived at his childhood home with precisely calculated gifts for everyone, selected based on their psychological profiles and consumer preferences he had algorithmically determined. His mother opened her present, a book on Mediterranean cooking, and smiled politely. "How thoughtful, love. Though I've gone mostly vegetarian lately. But I'm sure I can adapt the recipes." Jamie's mind immediately began calculating the nutritional optimization possibilities for plant-based Mediterranean cuisine, while his father launched into a story about his new allotment. As his dad spoke about the satisfaction of growing his own vegetables, Jamie found himself analyzing soil pH requirements and crop rotation efficiency rather than connecting with his father's simple joy in the work. "You're very quiet tonight," Sarah observed later as they cleared the dishes. "Just listening," Jamie replied, though he had been internally timing conversation gaps and noting speech pattern variations that indicated his mother's mild stress about hosting dinner. Sarah studied him with the directness that had always made her his favorite family member. "Are you happy, Jamie? I mean really happy? You look successful, but you seem distant." Jamie paused, a plate halfway to the dishwasher. "I'm working on it," he said finally. "Working on happiness," Sarah repeated softly. "That sounds exhausting." That conversation stayed with him as he began his systematic experimentation with conventional happiness practices. First came meditation. Jamie enrolled in a mindfulness class in a converted warehouse in East London, sitting on a purple cushion among 20 other seekers of inner peace. "Focus on your breath," the instructor guided them, her voice deliberately soothing. "When thoughts arise, simply observe them and let them pass. But Jamie's enhanced mind refused to cooperate. As he attempted to focus on his breathing, he found himself calculating the instructor's respiratory rate, analyzing the acoustic properties of her voice modulation, and mapping the optimal breathing patterns for various states of consciousness. When she rang a small bell to end the session, Jamie had inadvertently determined the bell's precise frequency and identified the metallurgical composition that produced its particular timbre. "How did that feel?" the instructor asked the group. "Peaceful," murmured several participants. "Refreshing," added another. When she looked at Jamie expectantly, he said, "Educational," which earned him puzzled stares from the other participants. He tried other approaches. Gratitude journaling became an exercise in probabilistic analysis of positive events. Art appreciation turned into studies of color theory and psychological response patterns. Even exercise became an optimization problem, as Jamie calculated the most efficient combinations of movements to achieve maximum fitness gains. After 3 months of unsuccessful attempts to medicate his overactive mind with conventional wisdom, Jamie decided to try a different approach. Perhaps the solution lay not in finding peace, but in finding intellectual stimulation that also provided emotional satisfaction. He joined a university extension course on ancient philosophy, hoping to engage with minds that might offer him some challenge. On the first evening, he met Dr. Elena Vasquez, a postdoctoral researcher in cognitive psychology who specialized in exceptional intelligence. Elena was undeniably brilliant. During their first coffee after class, she matched Jamie's rapid conversational pace, understood his references without explanation, and offered insights that made him pause and reconsider his assumptions. For the first time since the lightning strike, Jamie felt intellectually engaged with another person. They began dating, if their encounters could be called that. Their time together consisted primarily of intense discussions about consciousness, lengthy debates about ethical frameworks, and collaborative problem-solving sessions that lasted until dawn. Jamie's flat became filled with whiteboards covered in equations, philosophical arguments, and theoretical models. "We're solving the world," Elena said one evening, stepping back from a particularly complex diagram they had created about decision-making under uncertainty. "Are we happy?" Jamie asked, surprising himself with the question. Elena paused, marker still in hand. "Happy is such a pedestrian concept," she said. "We're intellectually fulfilled. We're pushing boundaries. We're maximizing our cognitive potential." But as Jamie looked at Elena, her sharp features animated by the thrill of intellectual conquest, he realized something crucial. They understood each other perfectly, but they didn't feel anything for each other beyond admiration for their respective mental capabilities. Their connection was entirely cerebral, lacking the ineffable warmth he remembered from his pre-lightning relationships. Their partnership dissolved as gradually as it had formed, both of them recognizing without explicitly discussing it that intellectual compatibility was not enough to build anything deeper upon. It was during this period of romantic disappointment that Jamie received a phone call that changed his perspective entirely. "Jamie?" Sarah's voice was strained, unusual for his typically composed sister. "Can we talk? I mean really talk, not like at Dad's birthday?" "Of course. What's wrong?" "It's not what's wrong with me," Sarah said carefully. "It's what's happened to you. Jamie, you've become a stranger. Do you realize that? We all feel like we're losing you." Jamie sat down heavily in his optimally ergonomic desk chair. "I'm still me, Sarah." "Are you?" Her voice carried a mixture of sadness and frustration. "You used to laugh at Dad's terrible jokes. You used to ask Mum about her book club. You used to call me just to chat about nothing important. Now when you're with us, it's like you're observing us from somewhere else entirely." The accuracy of her assessment hit Jamie like a physical blow. "I don't know how to connect anymore," he admitted. "Everything seems so predictable. I can see the patterns in conversations before they happen. I know what people are going to say before they say it." "Then stop looking for the patterns," Sarah said simply. "Stop predicting. Just be present with us. We don't need you to solve us or optimize us or understand us completely. We just need you to care about us the way you used to." After ending the call, Jamie sat in his quiet flat and attempted something he had not tried in months. He stopped thinking, not the structured meditation he had attempted in classes, but a simple cessation of analysis. He looked at his expensive furniture without calculating its depreciation rate. He listened to the city sounds outside without categorizing their decibel levels or identifying their sources. For perhaps 30 seconds, his mind was simply quiet. In that brief silence, Jamie remembered something crucial: the feeling of wonder. The pleasure he had once taken in not knowing something immediately. in being surprised by a plot twist or touched by an unexpected kindness. Before the lightning, mystery had been a gift rather than a problem to be solved. The revelation led him to make a more dramatic decision. He would not try to reduce his intelligence, which seemed impossible, but he would practice using it selectively. He would learn cognitive restraint. It was monumentally difficult. His enhanced mind rebelled against any attempt to limit its function, constantly slipping back into analytical mode. But Jamie approached the challenge with the same systematic determination he brought to financial analysis. He began with small experiments. When Charlotte stopped by his office the following week, Jamie forced himself to focus entirely on her words, rather than analyzing her subtext. "Rough day?" she asked, noticing the papers scattered across his desk. "The Morrison account," Jamie replied automatically, then caught himself. "Actually, yes. It's been challenging. How was your day?" Charlotte seemed surprised by the genuine question. She settled into the chair across from his desk and began telling him about a difficult conversation with her mother about care options for Charlotte's aging grandmother. "I keep trying to find the perfect solution," Charlotte said, "but there isn't one. Every option has drawbacks. Every choice means giving up something else." As she spoke, Jamie felt his mind begin its familiar pattern of optimization analysis, but he deliberately redirected his attention to Charlotte's emotional state. She was scared, he realized. Not confused or illogical, but frightened of making the wrong choice for someone she loved. "That sounds incredibly difficult," Jamie said, and meant it. "How are you holding up?" Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Not great, honestly. I've been pretending to be fine, because talking about it makes it more real." They sat in silence for a moment, Jamie resisting the urge to offer solutions or analysis. Finally, Charlotte continued. "What helps me is remembering that my grandmother raised 5 children through the war and the rationing years afterward. She's resourceful and strong. Whatever we decide, she'll make the best of it because that's who she is." Jamie nodded. "She sounds remarkable." "She is. And so are you, you know. For listening without trying to fix everything." After Charlotte left, Jamie reflected on the conversation. His mind had identified several potential solutions to her grandmother's care situation, along with financial strategies and resource optimization approaches. But Charlotte hadn't needed solutions. She had needed connection, understanding, and space to process her fears. For the first time since the lightning strike, Jamie had offered another person exactly what they required, rather than what his enhanced intelligence determined they should logically need. The practice became easier with repetition, though it never became automatic. Jamie learned to recognize when situations called for analysis and when they called for presence. He discovered that most human interactions fell into the latter category. 3 months into this new approach, Jamie made another significant decision. He reduced his role at Harrington Financial to part-time consultant, focusing only on the most complex and interesting cases. His colleagues were baffled by his apparent step back from success, but Jamie found the reduced cognitive demands left him energy for other pursuits. He returned to Brightport for Mrs. Pemberton's 80th birthday party, held in the community center where she had once taught primary school. The room was filled with former students, now adults with children of their own, all eager to share memories of Mrs. Pemberton's kindness and wisdom. "Jamie!" Mrs. Pemberton embraced him warmly. "How wonderful that you could come. I've been following your success in the papers. Quite impressive." "Thank you for inviting me," Jamie replied. "How are you enjoying retirement?" "Oh, I keep busy. I volunteer at the library, help with the literacy program. There's always someone who needs a bit of encouragement with their reading." She studied him carefully. "You look tired, dear. Are you taking care of yourself?" The concern in her voice touched something in Jamie that he had nearly forgotten. "I'm learning to," he said. "Actually, I wanted to thank you for something you said years ago about making room for mystery." Mrs. Pemberton's face lit up with recognition. "My husband's favorite phrase. He used to say that curiosity was more valuable than certainty." I'm beginning to understand what he meant. They were interrupted by a former student wanting to introduce Mrs. Pemberton to her grandchildren, but as Jamie watched the interactions throughout the evening, he saw something profound. These people, with their ordinary concerns and simple pleasures, had built meaningful lives through connection rather than achievement. Their joy came not from solving complex problems, but from sharing simple moments. Jamie began to integrate this observation into his daily practice. He established regular calls with his family that focused not on efficient information exchange, but on genuine connection. He joined Charlotte and her friends for their weekly pub quiz, contributing his knowledge when helpful, but mostly enjoying the collaborative effort and good-natured competition. Most significantly, he began using his enhanced abilities in service of community rather than personal advancement. He established a foundation to identify and support exceptionally intelligent individuals who struggled with the social and emotional challenges that often accompanied cognitive giftedness. Drawing on his own experience, he developed programs that taught cognitive restraint alongside cognitive development. The foundation's first client was a teenage girl named Maya, whose IQ tests had landed her in university at 15, but who had attempted suicide twice due to social isolation and existential depression. Jamie worked with her not to reduce her intelligence, but to help her learn when and how to engage it purposefully. The goal isn't to think less, he explained to Maya during one of their sessions. It's to think selectively. Your mind is an incredible tool, but tools are meant to be used consciously, not constantly. Maya looked skeptical. But how do you turn it off? My brain never stops analyzing everything. You don't turn it off, Jamie said. You redirect it. When you're having a conversation with a friend, instead of analyzing their speech patterns, analyze what they're feeling. Instead of predicting their responses, focus on understanding their perspective. Working with Maya and the other foundation clients gave Jamie's life a sense of purpose that mere financial success had never provided. He was using his gifts not to accumulate wealth, but to alleviate suffering, helping others navigate the same challenges that had nearly destroyed his own capacity for happiness. Still, the balance remained imperfect and required constant attention. There were days when his mind refused to quiet, when the weight of seeing too much and understanding too deeply drove him into isolation. But there were also increasingly frequent moments of genuine connection and contentment. Sunday dinners with his family became easier as he learned to value their perspectives without mentally correcting or completing their thoughts. His father's stories about the allotment began to reveal not just agricultural facts, but expressions of his desire for purpose in retirement. His mother's book club recommendations became opportunities to explore different ways of processing experience, rather than exercises in literary analysis. Most importantly, his relationship with Sarah deepened as he learned to be present with her rather than attempting to optimize their interactions. "You're different now," she told him during one of their weekly walks along the Thames. "More like you used to be, but also more settled somehow." "I'm learning to be still," Jamie replied. "Not physically still, but mentally still. To exist without constantly processing." Sarah smiled. "That sounds peaceful." "It is. Sometimes." 5 years to the day after the lightning strike, Jamie returned to the exact spot in the supermarket car park where his life had changed. A proper British storm was brewing again, dark clouds gathering on the horizon, though no lightning yet crackled among them. "Tempting fate?" asked a familiar voice. Jamie turned to see Charlotte. They had remained friends after his departure from full-time work at Harrington, their relationship deepening as Jamie learned to offer emotional presence rather than analytical solutions. "Just commemorating an anniversary," he replied, with a small smile. Charlotte nodded. She knew his story now, one of the few people he had fully confided in. "Any regrets?" she asked. "About what happened to you?" Jamie considered the question carefully. "No," he said finally, "but many lessons learned." They walked together toward the bus shelter as the first raindrops began to fall. Jamie glanced up at the darkening sky, not in fear, but with a newfound appreciation for forces beyond his control or understanding. "The main lesson," he continued, "is that intelligence is a tool, not an identity. When I let my enhanced mind define me completely, I lost connection with parts of myself that were equally valuable. My capacity for wonder, for joy, for being present in imperfection." Charlotte listened attentively as they reached the shelter, just as the downpour began in earnest. "Mrs. Pemberton was right," Jamie said, watching the rain create patterns on the pavement. "We need to make room for mystery." "Mrs. Pemberton sounds wise," Charlotte commented. "She is," Jamie agreed. "As are many people I once mistakenly thought had nothing to teach me." The storm intensified, rain pounding on the roof of the shelter. No lightning appeared, but Jamie found he did not mind either way. His brilliant, restless mind had finally found what it had been searching for all along. Not the perfect answer, but the perfect question. Not how to know everything, but how to be at peace with not knowing. Not how to optimize the world, but how to live fully within it, just as it is. As they watched the storm together, Jamie felt the now familiar sensation of his mind briefly quieting, making space for the simple wonder of existence. These moments were still rare gifts rather than his constant state, but they were enough. More than enough, The lightning had given him extraordinary intelligence, but learning to sometimes set that intelligence aside to experience life without constantly analyzing it had given him something far more valuable: the capacity for ordinary human happiness. In the end, Jamie's greatest achievement was not the millions he had earned or the complex problems he had solved, but the simple act of learning to be present in the world without needing to perfect it. His enhanced mind remained a powerful tool, but it no longer defined the boundaries of his existence. He had made room for mystery, and in that space he had found not answers but something infinitely more precious: peace.